Illinois.
Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine.
And Joanne Soike with For Better For Worse.
Today we have Don Blair with us again. So let us know you're there. This is a nose work topic. I know we've been doing a lot of behavior work this last few weeks. So we're going to circle back to some nose work and get some questions answered that if you have any, and see what we have going on. So, hi, Susan. Everybody's there. So we want to talk about problem solving specifically for nose work. So, Don, as a judge, what is the biggest problem you see in the number? If you had to pick one, what would be the biggest problem you see in trials?
So I think a lot of people underestimate odor acquisition, and I think when a dog walks through a scent cone two, three, four times before they alert to it, I think that's one of the biggest issues I see, and I think people if people spend a little more time on the odor acquisition, tying it in with that reinforcement, I think we'd have more passes.
Yeah. So why do you think? Because I would agree with that. Because as a CO, I do see that where dogs just walk past odor. I'm like, so
Yeah,
I know there could be a varying amount of reasons why that is, but so do you? And I know in some cases is maybe the dog wasn't ready to be in that situation. Um, but what are some of the other reasons you maybe see that they're not ready
I
or
think some
not seeing
the
it?
the odor acquisition isn't tied in enough with reinforcement. Some new handlers, some seasoned handlers, have a space between odor recognition and the reinforcement. That delay, I think, puts a clog in the dog's behavior chain, and so the dog's going around the room, hits the odor, but it's not immediately reinforced in training, and so that puts a lag in the dog's reaction to the odor. And then we have the second pass, the third pass, finally the fourth pass. We have the dog, taking its chance and going into the odor, and then sometimes I also think it's odor threshold. Um, I mean, as a CO, it's supposed to be pretty consistent on how the odors are presented. But even just the slightest tin with one hole versus three holes makes a difference in the threshold of the odor that's available. And I think a lot of times handlers aren't concentrating on not only odor acquisition, but the odor threshold, and tie that in with the reinforcement.
Hmm. I would agree with that. Go ahead,
So
Joanne.
I think can you expand a little more on the topic? Because I think what all of us see a lot of, right, is waiting for the dog to fill in the blank, right? Sit down, look at me, paw, drool, bark, whatever it does, right? And so I know you break down the chain really well. Can you, because that final response, whatever it may be, can be the sexy, good looking thing that I want to get to. But can you really talk about when you get a dog and you're first going to imprint odor, right? Does the final response have anything to do with odor imprinting?
No, absolutely not. The odor equals reinforcement is right at the top of everything. When I'm in my new dog, Mika, is a retrieve dog, so she'll have a scented towel. We'll throw the towel. So the reinforcement of the pickup of the towel and the enjoyment of that scented towel is immediate. We won't put the final response in for weeks or maybe even months. Um, but when we do, and we complete that behavior chain, then the dog is never reinforced, and the handler is not able to interject the blurt before the trained final response. That becomes the entire behavior chain. And so we have odor, trace to source, mental confirmation on the dog, followed by Joanne, exactly what you said. Whatever that physical confirmation is that the handler is expecting, the bark, the paw touch, the nose touch, the drool, whatever, just the hesitation, right? It becomes very large. But we want only one of those to be the cue for the handler to then come in and pay the reinforcement. And I think that's also, you guys all remember in the old days, right? It said, "What is your dog's alert?"
Yes.
Said sometimes he flicks his ear, sometimes he raises his tail, sometimes he stops and looks at me. Well, none of that's true, right? We want a true trained final response. So it is always a paw touch, it is always a nose freeze, or whatever the handler desires. But when we have that consistency, then we have a much more reliable dog, and it's much easier for even a novice handler to read.
Mm. So here's my question, because I think in some cases, and I know you've seen it as well, the dog does give them the final response, whatever that may be, and the handler still's like, I don't know. So,
Yeah.
so there's a
Are you
right.
sure?
Are
Yeah.
you sure? And the dog's like, I don't know if maybe I'm
Exactly.
wrong, right? So, so I think it all comes to a part of it, right? It's a trust issue. Like the dog is giving you what you've asked for, what you've trained it to do, and you still are not are still not believing the dog, or whatever you want to say, and they get discombobulated. So I think in some cases, right? Some cases
No,
you're right.
Nancy, I think you're 100% right, and you've seen it at every trial, right? The handler sometimes pulls the leash if it's a sit, or but put their hands on their hips. Are you sure? We'll come back to that, right? And
Yes,
after
right.
we get the third pass and the fourth pass, because they were sure, and now you've put the question mark over the dog's head. You're not reaching for your pouch and for my food, so I'm not sure either.
Right. So then in training, how could you, because at this point, we and those people who train, we do proof the dog a lot against the handler, because it's
Yeah,
just easier to teach the dog to just not to disregard some of the handler's nervousness,
sure.
that happens. So in training, I mean, we try to do a lot of proofing and maybe pause, or maybe, but I don't know. For some of the dogs, it works well, right? The dogs are like, okay, you don't know what you're doing. So they'll go back to it, or they'll tell them about it, or they won't stress about the handler not being, um, with it. Is there anything they can do in training that would help? Because a lot of it is trial nerves. The people get nervous, and you're right. It's like the dog gives them everything they want, and she go, I don't know. And they go around.
Yeah,
And then the dog's like, maybe I was wrong. And then sometimes the dog's like, I'm not going to mention it again, because I didn't get reinforced the last time. Right. So what can some people do in training? I mean, do you do more blind hides? What can you do to
no,
help?
I I love blind hides for the teams you can trust, but for the teams that are still kind of in that learning phase, I think I like to do a series of known hides. So we put out 20 boxes. Every third or every fifth box is hot. It's got every box has a mark on it, but these have the big plus signals like pick me, okay? And so it gives the handlers confidence, and then it expedites the odor recognition, mental confirmation, physical confirmation, reinforcement for the handlers. So then we can slowly move into the blind hides. In the words of Bob Bailey, right? Timing, criteria, rate of reinforcement. If we don't have those three elements, it the most dogs will really struggle, most animals will really struggle. And
Mhm.
so when we have the timing is correct because the handler has a known hide, the criteria is set, the nose touch, sit, the bark, whatever, they can recognize quickly, and then the reinforcement comes quickly. So we're, even though it's a known hide, we are making up for those times when the handler won't know, and they're like, I recognize, and then we're hoping to put in muscle memory, grab, feed, and go.
Right. Because because that's one thing. Because most of the dogs, and Tony, we're not just talking about you. We mentioned you. No, kidding. But it's one of those things that when they get into when they're training and they're doing, whatever, they're doing great. But then they get into a trial situation and it falls away a little bit.
Trust issue, and I think if we can set that up enough in training where the behavior chain happens not only for the dog, that odor recognition, trace to source, train final, mental confirmation, physical confirmation, but the handler starts to become comfortable reading those series of events, and they're at the right time reaching into their pouch, not interrupting the behavior chain. I see a lot of times also that the handler knows the dog is on source, or they believe the dog is on source. And Nancy, I know you have been with me at several competitions when it's a distractor. You've got everything that looks like it's right on point until the
Yes.
dog walks away, but you've already called alert. Too
Right.
late. And then we have the wah, wah, wah. Sorry,
Yes.
play again next time.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And so that train final response is really important. That there's my wife and I are big foodies, and so Guy Fieri says all the time, "You're in it to win it." You see
Yes.
those people that want to carve off that extra second, and they want to interrupt that behavior chain. And when they do that, unfortunately, a lot of times they get the ant.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because had they waited a second longer, the dog
Yep.
would have. I mean,
The
because
dog would have
usually,
walked away.
yeah,
The
the
dog
dog
Took
would have
me
walked
10
away.
years to learn.
Yep. Or they would have, yeah, or maybe they're in the neighborhood, right? The odor's nearby. The dog was still trying to figure it out, right? And and
Well, and that tracing the source. I mean, when Joanne mentioned the behavior chain, right? We have the odor recognition, and then all the way back to the beginning. We have our start. We have our hunting and discriminating. So that dog is hopefully throwing out those odors that they're not supposed to be alerting to. But
right.
these are pet dogs, and once in a while they'll stick to an odor that it's a naughty odor. They shouldn't be interested in it, but they are. And then we blurt alert, and unfortunately we get the no instead of waiting that extra second, and then the dog just walks away and leaves it.
Mm-hmm. So,
Or it's the real deal. We have the alert, trace to source. We wait that extra minute while the dog is getting that mental confirmation. It could be a multiple things while the dog doesn't pull the trigger quickly. But in any case, they finally do the look back or they do the paw touch, and then it's like, you took too long. I'm not believing this.
right. So, my question is because we're seeing this more now because Nosework's been around for a little while. I know Joanna and I have seen it. I don't know if you have. People with their second and third dog, because in theory, if you're on your second or third or fourth or whatever dog, usually you get better. This is very true in agility, right? Because like with my first dog, luckily he loved the sport, so we got through it, but I was horrible. I was a horrible handler because I didn't know. But my subsequent dogs, I did improve as a handler, because you learn after you make enough mistakes. But Nosework seems to go the other way. People are trying to rush their young dogs and trying to hurry up and get into competitions because for whatever reason, people think it's easier. And then you see the dogs when they hit adolescence, they start to fall apart a little bit. Have you seen that as well? Because there's a developmental period that happens with some, not all dogs, because the truth is my lab matured way quicker and faster than my boy.
Yeah.
But I waited until he matured a little bit because he was just like all over the place, right?
I think this is one of those places, Nancy, where you have to step away from the love of the dog and the oh my gosh, it's the handsomest dog I've ever owned,
Well, this
and
is
put on your lab coat, right? And the lab coat says, do we have good odor acquisition? What is the skill set of this dog? And unfortunately, I think some people do rush, and I think some people do really delay.
yes,
You've got a superstar dog. There's no reason to delay. But if you don't have that skill set and you don't have the handler set, then you need to wait and make sure that you have those things in place. Otherwise, unfortunately, I mean, nose work can be expensive. You guys, everybody knows this, right? And you don't want to be running out to trials and failing. And as much as the nose work community says, well, you learn a lot from your failures, I think you learn a lot more from your successes. And everybody should learn from their failures, but a lot of those failures could have been prevented if we took a clinical look at where's my skill set, where's my handling set, and are we really ready to go into this trial?
right.
And if it's just a gamble, then no, we're not ready for this trial.
Right. Well, and that's my point, right? With Jive, I felt much ready to go in sooner because she had the skill set, and I felt that we had the skill set as a team. So we started sooner. With the boy, the skill set for him took a little bit longer to install. and
Yeah.
and I didn't want him to practice all the bad behaviors at a trial, right? The distractibility and all that. It was just, I didn't want him practicing that in trial because I want him to go straight into odor or straight in to go to work and stop. And I didn't want to deal with all that other stuff. Right. So I did wait until he was a little bit prepared. And then I realized, yeah, he's ready. Now we can go in. And yeah, so far, I was telling Joanne, his track record looks so much better than Jive's because with Jive, I was able to go in and maybe we made a mistake here and there. So we didn't qualify every time, but he has qualified in every single trial he's gone the first time.
That's awesome.
But it's because I recognize he was not ready a year ago to go to a 3. When we went, he was ready. I felt that he was ready.
Well, and you guys have both heard me say it's going to be on a banner in my building, right? Proper prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Right.
So you need to look at that clinically to make sure that we are completely prepared. And, sometimes you're just not. You don't see the unknowns. The super slick floors, or I remember specifically the trial at Joanne's. You walked into the gymnasium, and about 8 feet in, the people were like, "Oh my God, I just walked into hell. It's 1,000 degrees in here."
Yeah. It was 1,000 degrees in there.
Yeah, and so Dave Conroy has a picture of me with the ice bag on my head, and so those kind of things you just cannot prepare for, but it still means you've crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's, and you're as prepared as we can possibly make it.
Right.
And even working Border Patrol didn't prepare you to sit in there and judge things.
No. At least at Customs, we had a fan to go stand in front of. It's just, armpits up. Let's cool ourselves.
No, not there. So,
well, yeah, because I that's why with the. And that's why I see a lot of people with really young dogs that maybe needed a little more prep time. And then because I think what happens, and I don't know, I know Joanne would agree. Sometimes we put him in too soon. You start to see these bad behaviors and then they just perpetuate. They get worse and worse and worse. And then it just becomes the cycle of training, of trialing where the dog is doing the same thing. And it just becomes a bad cycle. And I know you've seen it too with some dogs, because maybe they just weren't mentally, or they hadn't developed they hadn't matured enough yet to be able to do that, or some
Well,
do much sooner.
I mean, let's face it, a lot of dogs can go and be very successful in the one, and
Right.
the one does prepare you for the two, but the two does not prepare you for the three. And so when you've walked into a room and you've got decent odor acquisition, odor recognition, and the dog walks towards a thing, you're good at the one and the two. But when
Right.
you have the unknown of the three, that's where the wheels fall off the cart, and that's where we needed that proper prior preparation for the one and the two, so that we can cruise through the threes and get into the elite. But unfortunately, that's not where a lot of people's mindset is. They want to hurry and title instead of really be prepared for the one and the two are little hurdles. The three is a giant hurdle. And once we get over the three, we're cruising. But I mean, I know numerous people that have been in the double digits on passing their threes. I mean, you start racking up 10, 12 trials at the three, you just really weren't ready for that skill level.
Right. And that's okay when you have your first dog that maybe we didn't know and we're trying to figure out. But after, you
Yeah.
would think people would want to be better prepared to go in with their next dog, or just take a break, because that's sometimes what I've had to tell students. It's like, let's take a break and go back and fix it, because you know something.
Well, sometimes the dog is perfectly ready and the human can't. It's a pressure thing with the humans too, right? So
Right.
that's a whole other Facebook Live talking
No,
about the human factor.
exactly right. When when the human is not capable of reading everything the dog is giving you, and the dog's passing, the human is failing, that's also a huge proponent.
Mhm. So,
Yes.
Don, let me ask you a question. Um, and I know there's no real nice way to put this, but sometimes, and this goes back to training, and maybe Joanne can help me put it in a better way. Um, when you're training, your foundation training is not the best, and then you go and try to fix it. The challenge I see there is trying to overcome all those early, because it seems like in any training, the initially how you learned it is how you keep go when under pressure, it defaults to that behavior.
Yeah.
So fixing stuff is much harder when they've had a very poor foundation. And we have lots of people teaching nose work, and some of the foundations are uh, lacking, and then the dog and the teams are suffering for it.
Yeah. I think, Nancy, that you played right into right. Even though the foundation is not good, the dog has been reinforced for that. So they've been reinforced for shit behavior, and now you've got to try and do the repair work for that, which is the dog is expecting to be paid sometimes for doing nothing. Right, close enough for government work. Let's give the dog a treat,
Right.
and not really performing a behavior of notable behavior chains, odor acquisition, odor recognition, tracing the source, effort. I mean, we could go on, but now the reinforcement history has been paid for literally nothing.
Right.
And I couldn't agree with you more than it's it's a really big challenge to pick that torch up and now try to reteach the dog a true behavior that brings reinforcement when they've been reinforced for garbage behaviors, if any behaviors.
Right.
Mhm.
Because I know Joanne and I have both gotten people from other places, and it's been like, that's where I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to help that team, right? Because under pressure in training, they do okay, but under pressure, that old behavior comes back.
That and then the mindset, Nancy, I think of the handler, right?
Yes.
They've been used to reinforcing such low level, unwanted sometimes behaviors that, the cookies in the hand all the time for the dog just taking a deep breath and trying to figure out the room. And yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and that's been that's a challenge. I know, Joanne. Uh, and it's hard because we get a lot of that, right? And then they think, oh, my dog was able to find it, yeah, for NW1, but there's so much more to it, right? There's so much
Yeah.
more to it.
Well, and
Well,
it's people don't know what they're missing, right? They don't
Right.
know that they're missing foundations. So I mean, to me, it's the same as I had Bob's concrete company come pour the foundation of my house, and it's been 3 years and it's all cracked. Now, not only can I just not pour a new foundation, I got to tear the entire house down, dig out what's already there, and redo it. And I mean, it could take a year plus. Who wants to spend that time? I'm just saying, from a handler's perspective, it's really hard to find someone who, for a game we play with our dogs, right? How do you tell someone, listen, to be really successful, this is what you have to do to really rebuild it, versus we can make it a little bit better, and then you can go out and maybe get some titles. And so it's just hard, right? I mean, especially with people with older dogs. I know, like, people say, well, my dog's getting to be older, and we only have so much time left. So it's that human factor that you put into that, right? You know what the dog needs.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with you too, Joanne, that you can't even, in a lot of the instances, you like I just did an ORT not too long ago, and in some of those instances, the ORT is so incorrect that you're not going to have successes at the 1 and the 2, and so you can sometimes even forget the 3, and that, unfortunately, just by watching the ORTs. A shit sandwich never gets any better, and so
Yeah.
when you're starting off with terrible, it's not going to get better overnight. And so if you have to, Joanne hit it on the head. You have to tear it down and go back to basics, and then get the reinforcement for the right behaviors, for the right reasons. And the handler has to understand that, or they're going to have, it's going to bankroll to try and get to the 3. And it's just so much easier to do the right training from the start, good odor acquisition, good reinforcement history, and then roll through it with that. And you can do that with, we've seen hundreds of temperamentally deficient dogs, afraid of this, afraid of that. But through reinforcement, we can overcome a lot of that. I mean, I've seen some miraculous turnarounds with the proper application of reinforcement, but the improper application of reinforcement gets you nowhere.
Yeah.
We'll
So
get you somewhere.
yeah. Well, and that's why it's like
Gets
people.
you in class for 5 years,
Yeah.
still struggling to get the 1.
I know. Well, so yeah, because that is we see it a lot, and it's a very touchy subject, because we don't want to disrespect any other trainers out there, and some of them were good at training. And the other misnomer, some people, oh, she was great at this or that, another dog sport, does not mean she's going to be good at dogs nose work. I don't know why that's a thing, but it is.
Nancy, and the other thing in the professional world, right? We've got trainers that are selling DVDs and all kinds of other great stuff. One of them super famous for an incredible train final response. They're pouring buckets of tennis balls over dogs, and it's just incredible. But if the dog can't find it, none of that matters.
Right.
You got to find it to get to the train final response. And in the same video, they're throwing a bag of marijuana on the ground, and the dog is walking over it. It's like, okay, he sits like a champ, but he's still got to find it to sit like a champ.
Right.
So,
Yeah, But I
the
think
order with which we teach these things is super important, and
right,
then the emphasis that we put on things. If the handler can read that nose freeze, that's good enough. We don't have to have a sit. We don't have to have a bark. We don't
right,
have to nose touch. But in the absence of that, we have to have an end of the behavior chain for the handler to go, oh, I see that. Let me pay that.
right.
Yeah.
So what? So here's the thing. So and I know the trust issues is another thing, but let's say with a temperament, like you said, temperamentally sensitive dog, which all of us have some dogs that have that, where if you put too much pressure on the dog, do you recommend waiting to trial until that improves, or do you try some, like there's now we back in the day there was only NACSW and that was it. I mean, that's all
Yeah.
you had. Now you have, you know, other venues that they can play in. Um, I have found that sometimes if you play in the other venues for a little while and give the dog a little bit of that
Yeah.
experience in a little bit, that it seems to help. It just seems to help when they get, if they want to do an CSW when they get there. Do you see that as well?
Absolutely. I have started recommending people go to some of those other, in my opinion, lower venues than the NACSW. Um, but you can get into them, right? You can get into a lot of those trials. And so you can get the dog to a plethora of different environments and different situations. And win, lose, or draw, you're getting some experience there so that when you're ready for NACSW, I think that's very, very helpful. Um, Not that I don't want any handler pissing away their money, but when you have those temperamentally challenged dogs, and they're having some victories at these places, I think it's hugely valuable.
Okay. Yeah, because I do recommend, like, do this first, instead of rushing in to do the other.
Let's face
Um,
it. I mean, the NACSW is tough, and if you're not prepared, you're going to be pissing away a lot of money. Um,
yeah.
Not that the other ones aren't tough if you're not prepared with any
Either.
of the skill
Yeah.
sets. But when you start looking at some of the other challenges, when you're talking a 3 foot by 4 foot area, come on, people, right?
Right.
That's way different than the NACSW. And so, cut the dog's teeth, get your trial nerves under
On check.
control,
Hmm.
get some experience there, and then roll over into the NACSW. I think that still to this day, I think that's the gold standard of nose work.
Right.
Yep. So we had a question that I'll take. Is it detrimental if the dog is ready for more challenges to keep them at a lower level working other skills, right? Is it detrimental or you just don't move on? I mean,
So I think it's detrimental to the team, not necessarily to the dog. The dogs will work for whatever level of reinforcement you're giving them, but it's detrimental to the team in that there's not a continual rotation of progress.
so that being said, right? You're not going out and working your dogs in a stadium every day, right? What does your training methodology look like? You have to give them cream of the crop, but like top of what they're going to see. And yet you also have to test those skills, so you're not running these big giant areas every day, right?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. So we have our fundamentals, right? Odor recognition, the odor obedience, um, discriminations, right? Those are our building blocks, and then duration of the application of each of those skills is where we would go to the stadium and test. And so every day cannot be a test. Every day should be pounding out the fundamentals and the betterment of the fundamentals. I mean, Nancy and I know Joanne and I have joked about it, right? If I if I put out a class that says fundamentals, I get crickets. If I put
Yes,
out a class that says advanced superstar, bring your best, it fills
that
out in
is
a
a true
heartbeat.
statement.
But the 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 real advanced guys and gals are experts at applying the fundamentals. And
Right.
so those fundamentals are always the concrete foundation of going on to that next level.
Yeah, I would
And
agree because we've had this. Joanne and I talk about it all the time. If you see any, you're right. If you say foundation or fundamentals, that's it. It's a killer for any workshop or seminar you have going on because nobody will come to it.
Nobody, I'm way beyond that, right?
right. And so, I mean, I know you too, Don, right? When we talk about foundations and fundamentals, right? Okay, let's just use, right? We're teaching elevation. What I teach the young dog versus what I teach the medium dog versus what I'm teaching the advanced dog, it's the same skill, but I'm adjusting, right? That hide to challenge and teach the dog. I don't want that dog to hang out to dry, right? So, in terms of skill building, and pick whatever skill you want to talk about, right? But from baby dog to elite dog, right? It's sometimes you still might do a baby dog hide and then throw in something else, right? Like as you're teaching those skills.
So that to me is a different subject, right? That the concept building is in the medium dog, where we're teaching high, inaccessible, to the most black and white point. But if you don't have the other fundamentals of
Right.
odor recognition, tracing the source, odor obedience, you'll never get there, right? It's an impossibility. But
Yes.
once those foundations are there, then set up properly, you guys have heard me say it before, right? Allow the environment and your training aids to do the training for the dogs. And so once we have those fundamentals, then that should grow exponentially for the medium dog. Certainly not the newbie dog, because they haven't mastered the fundamentals. But that medium dog that's at the upper echelon of learning is ready for those concepts. And then we take each concept one at a time, so that it's not just throwing shit on the wall and hoping something sticks. It is absolutely, we're doing inaccessibles. And we'll do inaccessibles till we get the trained final response and it's clear to the dog. But remember, if we're doing inaccessibles or highs, right, we are teaching a fringe. So we have
Right.
to be careful not to overdo that and put in another idea in the dog's head that, hey, I'm close enough, pay me. And
Right.
so it's this enormous balance of what can this individual dog take? Does he comprehend it? And do they show that through the example of their work?
So so I do this pretty regularly with my elite teams or even summit teams. We do pretty regularly go back to fundamentals. Is that something that you would recommend?
Absolutely. Yeah. You're never too good for fundamentals, ever.
Yeah. Well,
I
and I
promise.
initially it got some pushback years ago, but now they never get any pushback anymore. They're totally
Nancy, I
cool.
promise you, with all of the police teams that I do, we do odor recognition, tracing the source, obedience to odor almost every time we train.
Mm,
When we're doing the testing phase, like Joanne said, then we're going out to a brand new area. We're really pushing the limits. And I don't care about a miss. A miss tells me areas that we need to work on. So if some handlers are petrified of a miss, I couldn't give a shit. If we have a miss, we have a miss. We're going to put it in our training program and we're going to go until it's no longer a miss. But if you're afraid of those, you're never going to have that constant rotation of advancement.
right.
Yeah. And I think for me anyway, it's changing now, but in the beginning, I think as people move to elite, you see a training day for them is I'm going to go out and set 10 hides in this space, and then we're going to move over here and we're work on 7, and then we're going to go over here and there's deep inaccessibles and there's elevation and there's 7 hides over here. And right. So it's like you can train almost everything you need fundamentally in a building, right? In a training center, in your space. It doesn't have to be 17 hides all at once. That's not what it's not training. That's testing.
That's testing, exactly. And we always want to make that distinction. When we have trained for the inaccessibles, then when we go out, we're putting out 10 inaccessibles. What is our result? If we're above 80% we are good. Go on with your next concept. If we're below 75%, the dog needs more education in that area. But if the other problem that I see is a lot of trainers keep shooting for 100%, right?
Yeah.
Nobody is 100%. Forget that notion. That
Right.
It's just craziness. You're holding your dog to a standard that, I don't know about you guys, when was the last time you woke up and just rocked the day?
Been a while.
Yeah, been a while. So you can't hold your dog to those standards. 75, 85% consistently, let's roll. Let's
Right.
rock and roll.
Right. That makes I'm so glad you said that, because that's what people are looking for. That I wanted the dog to be perfect. No, it's like it's like you can't. Nobody can do that, right? Nobody can do that. And so, but what a lot of trainers do, this is what the gist of what I'm getting is people are training for trial instead of training for skill, which is very different. That's why when we get new people from different places, we really break down the skills and make sure the dogs have the concepts instead of just going out there and putting hides out and hoping for the best, because then you don't know what you're training for. You're just
one of the questions, Nancy, that I ask when I have clients for nose work is who's COing, and if they know, I tell them, why do you care? If you know the skills and you know the rules, go. The CO doesn't matter.
Right.
You should not be worried about this judge or this CO or this anything. You have the skills, you have the rules, go.
Right. You're this, because especially in NACSW, the COs are pretty consistent for the most part, right? They're going to set, there's a standard of
exactly
of what we have to do. So it's just what changes is the
is
environment.
If your skill set is where it needs to be,
it doesn't matter.
It's relevant.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
You're competing against yourself.
Yep.
Right.
And I think the world may be changing. Well, the sport of nose work may be changing a little bit on that. So, not to like promote it, but we did a little bit of work yesterday. NACSW has a skills challenge out, right? And it's 4 different skills that they want you to test, but you don't get to be a part of that, right? You have to send the dog out. And I think it's the first time I've really seen like not a club. What do you want? A parent organization, right? Give good direction on, this is the dog's skill. You got to see if they know it without you saying, what here? What about over here? Do you know what I mean? Like, let them work it out by themselves. And if they can't do it, it's all it is, right? Is just something for you to work on. You know that skill's not really solid for you, and you just need to take the time to put it back.
Right.
Which is what you should be doing all the time in terms of skill building.
Right. And that's why we slice it as thin as possible.
Right.
And last night with 15 of my trainers came to our facility to work on thin slicing behaviors, because we tend to be lumpers, most people. And if you don't thin slice the behaviors, they're not going to get it. And that's a concept. It's difficult for us trainers, especially, those of us who have a time pressure.
I will say this though, that you guys both know me. It is a team sport. And so I don't want to go up to my starting line and go with God, Rex. I hope you do good, right? It's a team sport. I'm at the end of that leash supporting Rex. And if Rex makes a bad decision, I want to be there to correct the bad decision. And I also want him to know enough, if I'm making a bad decision, check over here, and he says, no, Odor's over here, that I'm smart enough to go with Rex to there.
Right.
And I think there's been in some instances, an overemphasis on the dog doing great, but the handler being a lump of clay in the middle of the room.
Right.
And that's bullshit too.
Right.
You should be there to support your dog. You should be thinking as a reinforcement machine, right? My dog has been trained to do so good. I'm a reinforcement machine. But when he does make the bad decision, I've got to be there to make sure he's not going to follow that path. And we're not going to piss away $400 for the weekend.
Right.
I
Well,
want to go home with those ribbons.
right. Well, and that's the thing. It's one of those you definitely want that it is, and I 100% agree that it is a team sport. And the beginning, the foundation is giving the dogs the skill and then adding the handler, right? Because usually that seems to work best.
Always secondary.
Yeah, always secondary.
Yeah.
But it does, and that's what I mean, because I see both extremes, right? I see folks that are so trying to control the search so much that the dog's like, okay, I guess we're not going to find that one because you're moving me around. And yes, we have the other side that's like, go with God and pray that you find something. It's like, no, the answer is somewhere in the middle. It's got to, they're both, it is a team sport. You have to be able to give the dogs the skills they need to do the job, but you also have to be able to be there, like you said, to reinforce, read the dog. Yeah. You have the thing is, I think Don, people, so your progression is similar, right? You give the dogs the skill first, then you add the handler, right?
You can't do it any other way, Nancy. In the early stages, right? The handler has to know where every hide is, where everything is, because we're building the behavior for the dog. If you try to create the dog handler at the same time as the dog, you'll always fail. It's just always going to be a failure. You got to build the dog up to a certain degree, and then you can slowly add in the handler. But until then, the timing, the criteria, the rates of reinforcement will be so skewed, you'll never have a trained dog.
Yeah, and Laura asked a question too. If a miss was because of a handler error and not the dog, within a training session, how would you recover that session or the next session to support the dog, right? So if it's a training session and the handler messes up, either you're doing blind hides and you shouldn't, right?
Right.
Or, right, the dogs are very forgiving, but it's a matter of how often are the mistakes happening.
But remember also, we have to consider, how is the dog learning? So this is Nancy's been with me when I've been chastised about telling the level 1 handlers to go back to a hide. Okay, it just pains me, it hurts me to do that, because the dog showed no behavior, no recognition, and now we're taking it gratuitously and feeding it at source. It's just the worst training in the world. So if it's a handler miss, then it's a miss, just like a dog miss is a miss. We'll make it up in the next session. But if you take the dog back there and pay him for something that wasn't recognized or deserved, I think you're messing up, you're graying the training.
Yeah. Well, and I think Jill and I were having this conversation not too long ago, because some people, it's like, well, he found it. Yeah, but he found it, but it was, not, it was awful. I mean, and not to say that I have not had those searches. You've seen a couple of them where like, okay, but that was usually me, not my dog. But the thing is, it's like in training, they don't want to have the dog fail. So for example, I am in agreement when a dog understands their job, understands what odor is, understands that they should tell me about it, and makes the decision to sniff the carpet, sniff the floor, or do something else, then the game is over.
Yeah.
Yep. You're done with that. And I have had, even with my own, with my own dog. He's like, well, I don't want to do that. Okay, you don't have to. You can go back and sit in your crate, and I will take out the very starving lab that wants to be, a confirmation
Yeah.
lab, and I'll play with her then.
And Nancy, that's where that changing the environment, right?
Right.
If for whatever reason you can't handle this environment, you're going to go back to your solitary crate. But I'm, as the trainer, I'm going to change your environment. I'm going to remove the carpet. I'm going to put the environment so you will be successful.
Right. When you come
And
back.
we're going to continue to strive during that. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to just drop the bar and pay you for shit. Right?
Right.
That's how we get to 10 threes.
Right.
Because
And
we
yeah.
pay for bad behaviors.
Yeah. And one of the issues, so here's my other question. Some dogs, and I know the answer, but I'm gonna put it out there anyway. Some dogs, there hasn't been enough drive built into the dog. So putting the dog away is really not consequential.
Yep.
Right? The dog is like, I don't care.
He actually wins, right?
Yes. He's like,
wanna
thank
be
God
out
this is
there.
over. Yes.
He doesn't want to be out there anyway, and so putting him in the crate is a victory. And then for those handlers that own those dogs, that's where we have to be extremely creative on what that reinforcement is. If we can't deliver something at the end of the day that the dog finds intrinsically reinforcing, we have nothing to work with. And so that means adjusting their food schedule. That means filet mignon for Rexo here. And we must adjust that until we get a couple of victories. When we get the couple of victories, the dog will show us this is worth my effort and concentration to perform this behavior and receive this reward. At the end of the day, if you don't have that, then we're back to square zero again, where the dog is just being reinforced for breathing.
Yeah. So yeah, because that's been because I've seen some dogs again that are like, whatever, I don't really care that we're going back to the crate. It's okay.
Well, Nancy, my personal opinion, this is not a dog issue. This is a handler issue.
Agreed.
The handlers are giving the dog free food. They're feeding the dog. I'm not up for starving a dog, but maybe we could creatively place their meals after training time and be using turkey, cheese, filet mignon for the reinforcement and get a little more spark in their ass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is normally a handler driven problem and not a dog driven problem. Most dogs love to eat. They love to eat great stuff. And, if we're creative enough, we can make that valuable to the dog. And that's really where we want to be. Everything in this whole world, with all of our bomb dogs, drug dogs, and everything, starts with reinforcement. Nothing else matters to the dog. Reinforcement is the key to everything.
Well, so we got another question, and I know we've already answered this, but it just continues to keep coming. So can you say it in a different way? Known versus unknown hides doesn't matter the level of the dog, right? It's known hides is assessing and practicing and learning, and unknown hides is testing. So
Right.
when we talk about rewarding the dog, right? Yeah. What do you say? 80 to 85% should probably be known so that you are paying that dog and putting the skills and problem solving on the dog.
Especially early on. If we're talking a new dog, it's 100%. You can't do it any other way.
Yep.
And then when we have the rehearsed body mechanics of the handler recognizing alert, right? That initial physiological, psychological change in behavior of the dog's odor recognition. Now, even if we're on a vehicle, I'm trying to find my hands here in my screen. Too much Italian in me, right? That may only be 3 inches, but when they recognize that, then that's where we're working on those mechanical skills of the handler. But at a new dog and a newer dog, it's 100%. Then we can slowly, as the handler develops those mechanical skills, go into the unknown where they trust the dog. If they don't trust the dog, we're just detracting from the dog's skill set anyway. So why not just do them known?
Right.
Yep. And I think, like we said, right, unless you're 100% reading that dog, which I don't think anyone is, right? What are they learning every time
Mhm.
you make a miss?
Well,
Yeah.
and that's the big challenge, right? Reading their dog when there's odor or not. So, which goes back to a question Judy asked. So, when you're doing a blank room or a blank search, how do you reinforce that? Because
I love it.
yeah, that is a very that's I've heard lots of different
Yeah. The
answers to that.
the beauty is you don't feed the dog. They don't know it was a blank. They just know they didn't get reinforced. There is no science. There's been no testing. There's no scientific studies that say when you walk out of a blank room and feed your dog that they understand that they've been fed for a good blank search. So it's again that balance of the dog performing the if we just take a step back, right, being a little anthropomorphic, the dog has decisions to make. If it's a blank room, they have two decisions. They can lie to us and say there is something there when there's nothing there, or they can tell us there's nothing there when there's nothing there. In the face of a loaded room, they have those same options. They can lie to us and say there's nothing there when there is something there, or they can tell us where it is and where it is at. And so, keeping in the most black and white, scientifically based training, we will always pay for the fines and we will never pay for the not fines.
Right. So that's why, because it makes people uncomfortable not to pay. So I always tell folks to pay when you leave the room because you're not paying for not finding anything. You're just paying for.
Yep. And I go one step farther to that. I also pay when the search is done and I say finish. Yeah, good dog, right? And I will give a cookie as we're leaving. And the reason why, the dog performed that search correctly, right? He didn't lie. He didn't tell me about something that wasn't there. He didn't,
But
you
if
know.
you didn't know, right?
Right. You didn't know.
No.
Yes.
Well,
Well,
I
like
mean, not in a trial, but when I'm training,
yeah.
right?
And yeah, Lily asked, can you praise them out?
Mhm.
Like not give them a treat and say, good dog, let's go. Because
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
even though you don't know.
But Nancy, you and Joanne have both been at trials with me when people have paid on a false.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And they have paid when the dog was wrong. They walked out of the room and said, that was a blank. Good job. It wasn't a blank. Your dog walked the odor. And so I think rather than even just dabbling in that pool, when it's known and it gets paid. When it's not known and it's unknown, it doesn't get paid.
Right.
And then it's consistently black and white.
Right. And you can at a trial, if you choose to do that, which is not a terrible idea, you can pay them on the recovery boxes. And so
Yeah.
if you feel like you need to pay them,
Can I talk about that for just
Sure.
1 second? So the recovery boxes are, in my opinion, as bad an idea as paying your dog at level 1 on a fine they walked. The recovery boxes are filled with schmutz.
yes, they
And
are.
So you're paying your dog on this box filled with saliva and scratches and schmutz, sometimes before you go into the search. What do you think they're going to do on the container that has the most saliva and schmutz?
Yeah.
Even if it's a blank, they're going to go for that. I've seen it 100 times in trials.
Yeah.
Avoid those boxes like the plague.
And it's true because the dogs really do know what they're there for.
They do. And it's a
They
human
really
thing.
do. They
It's
know
a
what
human
they're there
factor.
for.
It's a human feel good that
It
we
is.
don't need.
Yeah, it is. It's
Just
true
avoid them.
because my dogs, whether I do boxes or not, they doesn't make a difference. The performance, it doesn't make a difference.
And let's be realistic. If your dog breaks because he didn't get one find, he was never in it anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think my rule for those, I never do them anymore. I haven't for years. But if my dog catches the wind and drags me to that box, I'll pay him on the box. Right. But we walk by it. Otherwise, if he's not going to go and like drag me over there, I don't need to go there. Right.
No.
So, yeah, Adrian asked the same question I did. She said, "How?" So, like in like if they found something or not, that was my point. If you leave a blank area and the dog goes to, and you can, if you feel like you should pay something or have the dog find something, you can always go to the recovery box, which is different than the practice box. I mean, it's supposed to be different, right?
You're bringing up a great point, though, right? If we haven't instilled in the dog some resiliency in our training program, then these little exercises are just human feel goods. Just do away with them, okay? We should be able to take a dog into, Joanne hit it on the head earlier. I take my dogs into an entire stadium and it's blank, it's a blank. I don't expect them to false at 40 minutes. I don't expect them to false at the fire extinguisher container. It's a blank. The only answer that they can give me is no sits, get out of there. And so unless you're building that kind of skill set and resiliency in your training, you're rolling the dice anyway.
Right. Because that's what for blank spaces you do. You have to build that time in for your, as you go up in level. Like, the elite people should be able to search for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes without finding anything, because sometimes that's what's happened. That's what's going to happen, right? They're going to have to do that, and the dog has to do that.
Nancy, you had that elite trial at the fairgrounds, and that one search was probably 6 minutes of blank, going into another fairground search of 6 minutes with 3 hides.
Right.
And so you just never know. But if you're there again, we're just dropping back to fundamentals and skill set.
Right. Because that's true. It's one of those things at the elite level, you try to build that time in where they can go a certain amount of time without finding anything, so the dog doesn't panic. Because you can tell the dogs that are used to finding stuff right away, if they go more than a little while. And you were the witness to this one, Don. My lab was in the room for 2 minutes without finding anything, and she was lovely. She didn't falter anything, but yeah, she had that resiliency to be able to search for that long because I left her in there that long.
Yep.
Over there.
That's the important part.
She did not give me the wrong answer, but she ran around for 2 minutes and didn't tell me. And I didn't, and I let her run around for 2 minutes. So if I had not put that time in that she can search for that long without finding anything and not lying to me, I would have been in big trouble, because I left her in there that long. It was a blank room, and I left her in there almost the whole 2 minutes. that search, that search was. So yeah, building that, like you said, that resiliency and time is important for sure.
Yep. We're getting some questions on slobber boxes. So
oh yeah,
I'm just going to tell you my viewpoint on it, because I'm actually trying to set up some experiments with it. It's not slobber. Okay. So if you got, the bloodhound that you collect all the drool from and you spread it on your box and no dogs hit on it, they're not proofed off of dog slobber. Okay. What's happening, and we're trying to identify what is in the actual saliva, because it will come out in saliva. It will come out in the pads of the dog. Okay. Both the same. So there is some sort of chemical component that what I've noticed is overexcitement, overarousal, or fear is releasing the same thing. And so, Don, I think as a judge, you see the dog's like, blah, right? And they slam on that box, and then you get 5, 6 hits where the dogs are nailing it, and then it fades away, right? So it's a chemical component that goes away in the air. If you spritz it with water, you can reactivate it for another dog or two. but it's not regular dog slobber, guys. So just
So we call
have
it
you seen
we
the same?
call it happy juice, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
pheromones of a dog that believes it's correct, right? I'm about to get paid. And then there's no disappointment pheromones. I'm about to get paid. So they're beating up the box. You're exactly right. It's the saliva, it's the feet, it's the pheromones that the dog releases, and then they don't get paid. There's no disappointment pheromones. It was the excitement, and the next 5 dogs will hit that box. And so, we see it all mostly in containers, but I've also seen it in vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
and you see it on productive areas and interiors.
Yep.
Yes.
Right? Some dog hits on a file cabinet or a desk drawer, and they're like, "Ooh, this is it." And the next 3 dogs hit on that, right? And so the other thing I want to bring up, Joanne, that this is something that I've experimented with our law enforcement dogs, is the levels of discrimination.
Mm.
So some dogs will smell that and immediately respond, right? Other dogs, and you've seen this, right after a dog hammers a bag, they sniff it an extra time, they sniff it a third time, and they walk away. There's
Right.
no odor here. I don't care what Rex said. He's wrong. There's no odor here. And it's that levels of discrimination. We've gone now to pouring urine and scratch marks over our training aids to make sure that the dogs they smell it, they go to the next level. Oh, I'm going to mark it. And they go, oh, wait a minute. Before I pee, that's C4. I should sit and get rewarded. And so it's a level of discrimination that many dogs are not exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is and in some cases, depending on how strong the dog is that comes in after, if there's and it's usually, and I know I you can agree, I've seen a lot of times the dogs don't always alert. They're just interested in,
Yeah.
there's not really an alert, there's just interest. Because I think it was one of Joanne's trials. A dog came in, licked the box, and I'm like, oh boy.
Oh no.
And sure enough, dog came in right after it. They never alerted, but they were interested enough
Yeah.
that the handler called it before.
Yeah, but I've also seen where it looks exact. You put it on video and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But I think that's less so than the
Yes.
prolonged interest, right?
Right.
But Nancy, that's where the handler training comes in, right? Give the dog a second, maybe 2,
Yep.
to give you that trained final response. The fact that they're interested for in human terms a lengthy amount of time doesn't mean it's there. And if you give them that extra second, they walk away.
They do. They absolutely do. And they absolutely do. And one of the things, and Don, and this is what he's been saying the whole time, you guys, is you want everything to be clear to the dog. Only Odor gets paid, whatever that payment is. And that rate of reinforcement has to be there for the dog. That's the foundation for mostly all the problems that they're out there, right?
Yeah.
There's only, and the truth is, for the handler, the nerves and all that, that's just another that's another thing to work through, right? Because
Well, Nancy, I know you do a course on competition, right?
Yes.
Keeping about you, keeping your head about you, and nothing is better than successes, right? That's
Right.
what gives you those big confidence boosts. And so as we morph into the new dog training, 100% known, 80% known, 70% known. Now we're talking a mid-level dog or high-level dog, 50% known to none percent known. That's the confidence that's the progression of a good dog team, right?
Right.
I mean, I would never start a bomb dog handler out with unknowns. That's ridiculous. You're just going to ruin the dog.
Right. Well, we've gotten a few of those. They start blanks with the baby dog. It's like, okay.
When you because the transformation is the dog learns a little, and when he's about medium, then we can start teaching the handler. Until he's at medium, we can't teach the handler anything. because
Right.
there's nothing to teach, right? You don't even know what you're looking at.
Right. Right. The dogs have to develop the, and that's the biggest challenge is for people to allow the dog to do their job, right?
Yep.
Because, and I think, and I always tell this to my handlers, it's like you are your dog's caretaker most of the dog's life. But when you walk to the line, you are no longer their caretaker. You are their teammate.
Yep.
You have a job to do, they have a job to do. And everybody has to be responsible for their job. And then you can go back to being cuddly mommy, right?
But those job descriptions are separate.
That's correct.
Separate.
Well,
I
and
want handlers to be an observer and maybe a little bit of light troubleshooting and a reinforcement machine. The dog has the skills: hunt, discriminate, alert, trace to source, train final response. And then we have the reinforcement and the restart. But those job descriptions are completely separate, and you can't do one without the other. I don't want my handler's nasty little hands showing the dog where to search. He should know where to search.
yeah, and I think too there's just a level of difference, when you talk the professional dog world, you mess up, man. You might love that dog to the end of the earth. I'm taking him. You suck, right? You can't do what we paid money for this dog to do. You don't get him anymore. And so I think people are much more willing to say, I don't want to lose this dog. They might love that dog as much as we do, right? But it's not their property. So
Right.
it's, clean your guns so you don't die or it doesn't get you killed, right? Same thing. It's like it's I don't know, they just have a different outlook on the dog because
Right.
it's not the one well, you might go to bed with it every night, but as long as it's not a Malinois that doesn't eat you, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I don't. And you guys have both heard me talk before. I don't think we should expect less of our nose work handlers, right? You guys know it pisses me off beyond belief. Somebody says, "Well, this was a rescue dog." Well, that was 4 fucking years ago. What has he been doing in 4 years, right? He's
Right.
not a rescue dog today. He
Right.
was a rescue dog 4 years ago.
Right.
So, let's take accountability, responsibility. Um, we're feeding we're feeding him great food. We're giving him great vet care. We're taking him to Nancy or to Joanne for training. This is an expensive little shit. And
Yes.
the least we can do is allow him to perform the behaviors that we're giving him the filet mignon for.
Right. And that's true because, and that we say that all the time because people, well, I do a lot of behavior work and that's what we get. Well, he's a rescue. Well, how long have you had him? It's always a
Yeah.
question I ask. How long have you had him? If you've had him for, you got him when he was 4 months old and he's 2, this
Yeah.
is, he's not, he no
Yeah.
longer, you didn't just pick him off the street and, you didn't just pick him off the street and come in. He is your dog. It is just for some people, and I know what it is and why they say it. It's because whatever bad behavior they don't want it to be on them. And it's like it goes back to just it's not on you. It's like you just didn't make whatever you want for the dog to be clear. So, but yeah, I have a rescue dog, but I had her when she was 8 weeks old. So whatever she is, it's what I've created, right?
Yep.
And she's, she's a great little dog or whatever, but I don't consider a rescue because, I got her when she was 8 weeks old. It's not
Well,
my
I mean,
opinion.
let's face it, Nancy. There's no perfect dogs. There's no perfect handlers. There's no perfect trainers. So everybody has hurdles. You can have the best dog. I mean, I work with some of the best dogs easily in the United States, and that dog, the $50,000 dog, has some issues that you wouldn't work with, or he just has them, right? That's just the way he's hardwired. We can't throw our coffee cup on the ground and say, damn it, we need another one. We got to deal with it. And so that's where that creative training, the keeping in mind, right? that high rate of reinforcement. It's the only reason the dogs are out there. Getting them a good environment to learn in, and then like Joanne said, now we're cooking with oil, and now we'll start to push the environments. We'll start to get more duration. We'll start to get all of the T's crossed and the I's dotted for the skill set that we are after.
Right. So if you most of us see Don on a regular basis, those of you who are from far away, if you want to learn more about what Don does and where, and get his contact information, he does have a Facebook page, is CIA, with Don Blair, or you can, I will put his information in the comments so that you can reach out to him if you're interested. Joanne and I usually have him out doing workshops for us at our facilities at various parts of the year. So, and I see you guys earlier mentioned about fundamentals, so I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to call a workshop, Dad, and I'm going to have Don come out. So we'll see how many of you show up for that.
Crickets, I'm telling you.
I'm busy that weekend.
Are you kidding me? Have you seen my dog? We don't need fundamentals. We need spaceships.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully you guys got some stuff to consider, think about, and look at, and yeah, fundamentals and all those things matter. And those of you who train at Joanne or hear it like ad nauseum, but we have Don to kind of reiterate that, because that's what they do too, right? The detection people, that's what they do. So I will put his information there on the show notes. I think I have his email address and his Facebook page. I will grab that. And thank you all for coming out. And yep, here it is. Let me just put that in the.
Yep. So thanks, everybody. So she'll put Don's Facebook in there. If you want to like that, you could also like For Your Canine and For Better For Worse. If you're already not following us, that would be great. So you can get information on all the things that we offer on our Sunday night Facebook Lives, as well as what we're doing.
Right. All right, all. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the weekend.
Thanks, everybody.